Hello, and welcome back to the William Gomes podcast. I am William Gomes, and I am grateful to have you here. This series is called Reading Seminar 1 and 2, Lacan's Return to Freud Revisited. In the previous episode, we examined transference beyond the idea of relationship. We saw that for Jacques Lacan, transference is a structural effect of the analytic situation rather than an emotional bond to be managed. It arises from the position the analyst occupies in the analysis and speech, not from personal qualities or relational dynamics. In this episode, we turn to a concept that is inseparable from transference: interpretation. Interpretation is often imagined as the core analytic act, and yet it is also one of the most misunderstood aspects of psychoanalysis. In many therapeutic settings, interpretation is understood as explanation. The analyst listens, identifies an underlying cause, and explains it to the patient. The assumption is that once the correct meaning is revealed, change will follow. This assumption seems intuitive. It fits with a model of understanding as cure. But Lacan rejects this model decisively. For Lacan, interpretation is not an explanation, it is an act. To see why this matters, we need to recall what we have already established. Psychoanalysis does not aim at coherence, insight, or adaptation. It works with speech as a medium in which truth appears indirectly, often through error and disruption. If this is the case, then interpretation cannot function as a delivery of meaning. Meaning, when fully articulated, often stabilizes the ego rather than unsettling it. Explanatory interpretation risks doing exactly what analysis must avoid. It closes speech. When an analyst explains a symptom, a fantasy, or a repetition, they may produce relief. They analyze and may feel understood, but this understanding can function as a stop. Once something is explained, it no longer needs to be spoken. It can be placed neatly into a narrative. The work of speech is replaced by the comfort of meaning. Lacan therefore insists that interpretation must operate differently. Interpretation for Lacan is an intervention in speech. It is not addressed to the ego's need for understanding, but to the structure that organizes what is being said. This is why Lacan often describes interpretation in terms of punctuation rather than explanation. Interpretation may take the form of a cut. It may interrupt a narrative at a precise moment. It may repeat a word back to the analyzed and isolating it from its context. It may be nothing more than a brief remark or a silence that allows something to resonate. What matters is not what the interpretation means, but what it does. An interpretation is successful not because it clarifies, but because it produces an effect in speech. This effect may be confusion, it may be surprise, it may be a sudden shift in association, it may provoke resistance. All of this can be signs that interpretation has touched something structural. This is also why timing is crucial. An interpretation delivered too early may foreclose speech. An interpretation delivered too late may lose its force. There is no formula for correct timing. Timing depends on the rhythm of the session, the movement of speech, and the position the analyse and occupies in relation to what they are saying. This is why interpretation cannot be standardized. There is no correct interpretation in the abstract. The same words delivered at different moments can have entirely different effects. This emphasis on timing distinguishes Lacan's approach sharply from interpretative systems that rely on symbolic dictionaries or theoretical templates. Interpretation is not the application of knowledge. It is an act that intervenes in a specific situation. This also explains why Lacan warns against excess. Too much interpretation can be as damaging as too little. When the analyst interprets constantly, speech becomes dependent on interpretation. The analyze and wait for meaning to be supplied rather than allowing speech to unfold. In such cases, interpretation becomes a form of mastery. The analyst appears as the one who knows, and the analyze and as the one who receives knowledge. This dynamic reinforces the very structure that analysis seeks to loosen. Lacan therefore insists that silence can be interpretative. Silence is not an absence of action. It can function as a cut that allows speech to encounter its own limits. It can provoke further association. It can mark that something has been said without immediately translating it into meaning. Silence, in this sense, is not neutral. It is an act. This brings us back to the ethical dimension of interpretation. If interpretation is an act rather than an explanation, then the analyst bears responsibility for its effects, not for its correctness. There is no guarantee that an interpretation will produce insight or relief. It may provoke resistance, frustration, or even anger. These responses do not indicate failure. They indicate that interpretation has intervened at the level of structure rather than meaning. This is why Lacan insists that interpretation must be minimal. The less it says, the more it can do. A brief intervention that shifts the direction of speech is often more effective than a detailed explanation that saturates meaning. This minimalism is not aesthetic, it is structural. It respects the fact that truth appears indirectly and cannot be delivered whole. It also preserves the analyse and responsibility for their speech. Interpretation does not take over the work of speaking. It returns it to the analysan in a different form. Seen in this light, interpretation is inseparable from transference because they analyze and addresses speech to another, presume to know. Any interpretation risks being taken as authoritative knowledge. Lacan's approach aims to subvert this presumption, not confirm it. Interpretation, when it functions as an act, undermines the idea that the analyst holds the truth of the subject. Instead, it allows the subject to encounter how their own speech is structured, repeated, and disrupted. In the next episode, we will extend this discussion by examining technique as an ethical position. We will see why Lacan insists that analytic technique cannot be reduced to a set of methods and why it must be grounded in an ethics rather than a promise of outcomes. Thank you for listening. This is the William Gomes podcast. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and if you found this episode helpful, you're very welcome to follow, share, leave a comment or a rating. I'll speak with you again soon.